Hey YouTube, it's SmartVan here, and this video is all about LTE internet in my camper van. First, I'm going to talk about what the setup is, how I did it, and then I'm going to show you step by step how you can do it yourself as well. At the very end of the video, I'm going to go over my reflections on everything and, all the good and bad of this setup. So first of all, what is it? Basically, when I drive around the city or even outside the city, I have Wi-Fi on all of my devices, and it connects to an LTE connection to Verizon's towers, and I have unlimited data. So while I'm in or around my van, I basically have unlimited data. My phones think they're connected to the home network and they back up every night. My computers, just work, and it's super wonderful to have internet everywhere. As far as why I chose to do this, I think internet is very important, just personally for me. I use it all the time. I think it would be a major inconvenience if I had to go to like Starbucks or Panera to use the internet every time. And also I want my internet to be fairly fast as well. So I want to be able to stream HD video, for instance. And finally, I don't want to be capped by any either data caps or speed caps. So I don't, my phone has unlimited data, right? Unlimited data. But if I start using it too much, it'll just get throttled, and that's not going to be very fun as well. So what is the setup I have, and how much does it cost? At a very high level, I have an antenna that I've mounted to the roof of my van, which can receive LTE signals, as well as broadcast Wi-Fi signals. And it's connected to a router, an LTE router, which has a SIM card in it. And the SIM card gives me access to a Verizon unlimited data plan, which is grandfathered in, which lets me use all the data I want without any speed caps. As far as the approximate costs of everything, the price to lease a Verizon unlimited data plan is around $130. You can get these things on eBay. Basically, one of the sellers who owns a plan that has multiple lines will just lease them to you for this monthly fee. The router I have is a Cradlepoint IBR 1100, which I got for $250 used, but you could also get basically a consumer version of a LTE router for around $100 something. And finally, the antenna I have is a $360 antenna, but you can find one for as cheap as maybe like $120 probably. And I will talk about the specific parts and model numbers in the build portion of this video. But these three things together give me access to the internet anywhere I go in the city, anywhere I go around the city, and it's just fantastic. I think it's definitely a game changer. So let's go ahead and talk about what it takes to build out LTE internet in a camper van. Alright, so in order to get access to the roof of the van, we're going to have to remove both the headliner and this headliner shelf, which is this gray plastic piece up here. Now let's start with the shelf. So the shelf is held in place by several bolts, which are Torx head, and they are here, here, and over here. And on top of that, there is this guy over here, which you can pop this off with a screwdriver, and then boom, remove that guy. And now same thing on the other side. It's all just symmetrical. And once that's done, give it a good pull to release the retaining pins. And for these pillars, it's just a matter of pulling this out, and then you should be able to lift the headliner right off. And so once you remove the headliner shelf, it should look like this. You'll see there's some holes where the retaining pins go. Once the headliner shelf is out of the way, you can remove the headliner itself. You'll probably have to remove the weatherproofing strip from the doors, as well as kind of nudge the headliner out of panels on the side pillars. For safety, you should also undo your battery connection, since we're working so close to these airbags. And you'll want to wear gloves too, since the headliner contains fiberglass up top. And there's a couple final retaining pins and screws that need to be removed first, but once that's done, it should come off. And now the final step is just to cut that wire for that existing AM/FM radio antenna, and go ahead and just unscrew the bottom part. Once that's done, the top part just comes right off. This is where we're going to drill the hole. First, tape a bag to the inside so you can collect any sheet metal that might fly off from the drilling. Alright guys, I'm gonna be real. This is like the scariest thing I've done so far to the van. I think this was definitely the point of no return. Over here I'm using a step drill in order to widen the existing hole. I'm aiming here for a 3/4 inch hole. I found out online also that some people recommend using a punch instead since it delivers cleaner results. And of course, if you don't want to do this yourself, it should be pretty easy to find a local shop in the area that could install an MIMO antenna mount. At this point, I'm plugging the hole with just a standard 3/4 inch plug, which I needed to do since I did not yet have the antenna. But if you already have the antenna, you can skip this part. And now a quick note on insulation. You'll notice that the roof is a big metal sheet, which means it's a great candidate for Dynamat to reduce road noise. And next you'll notice that the headliner doesn't really have any insulation built in, but it does have a large gap. So I cut out a section of 3M Thinsulate and adhered it using some 3M adhesive spray, which should add just a little bit of extra insulation. Before we go further, let me introduce the router I've selected. This is the Cradlepoint IBR 1100. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, there are definitely cheaper consumer-grade routers out there. However, if you're able to get this at a nice price point, for instance used, I think it makes for a really great stable router. That said, we're going to be stowing this up away in the headliner shelf, so we need a way to turn on and off the router conveniently. That brings us to the switch, which we're going to use to turn the router on and off from within the cabin, as well as know if it's currently on. So for that, we have a single pulse, single throw switch with a built-in indicator LED. And we have a resistor that we wire to control the current into the indicator. On the back there are 4 pins. The big pins are controlled by the switch and the 2 little pins control the LED. I chose a red LED because it interferes the least with night vision. I also used a 470 ohm resistor. Here's a super basic wiring diagram showing how it's all connected. You can see that once you flip the switch on, the current can flow to the LED indicator as well as the router. So here's the completed wiring harness. And you can see on one side I have an XT60 connector, which I'm going to be using to deliver power. And that's all going to be controlled by the switch. So here I have these crimp on quick connects, and that's going to connect to the switch so that the switch can work its magic. Up next, let's drill a hole for the switch. Alright, now using a step drill, I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole into the headliner shelf so that I can put the switch into that hole. Now, I actually quite like this positioning for the switch because it makes it really easy to tell at a glance if the internet is on or off, and it also really makes it easy to toggle that switch even while I'm driving. Once it all fits, you should be able to push it right through and make sure that it works nicely. Next is the antenna. This is a 5-in-1 shark fin antenna by Panorama Antennas. 5-in-1 refers to the 2 cellular, 2 Wi-Fi, and 1 GPS output. You can see the specific model number written up here. Now with the serial number, you should be able to order this either online or through a distributor, and so I'll drop that info in the description. And as for the wires, these are the 4 wires that you'll need to connect this specific antenna to this specific router. And so if you happen to use this combo, these are the model numbers you'll get. This is the minimum cable length that they make, which is what you want in order to minimize loss. And now with these cables and the router in hand, we're going to go ahead and install them onto the headliner shelf. Here's the nearly completed headliner shelf. You can see I have the 2 Wi-Fi and 2 cellular cables snaking out of this hole on the left. And you can also see an XT60 connector, which I'm going to use to receive 12 volts from the battery. Let's take a closer look at how this is all wired up. So the Cradlepoint router sits on the right, and I've drilled holes again, and I'm just sending in these 5 cables total. So remember, there were 2 Wi-Fi and 2 LTE cables. And these cables are kind of stiff too, so you might have to battle them as you shove them in. But, as long as you don't damage them, it'll be fine. And the 5th cable is that power cable, which you should be able to cut open and splice in that XT60 connector, and it's fairly obvious which one's power and ground. Also, you're probably noticing that I've adhered some Velcro onto the back so that I can put the Cradlepoint router right up in here without having it move excessively. So that's pretty nice. So as you can see, the wires run along here, and here we go. That's the output. And over here, right, this is where we're going to receive power from the house battery. and that line is going to be interrupted by this switch. So only when the switch is on will we send power all the way to the Cradlepoint router. And now to install the antenna. It's really important to wipe this area down with rubbing alcohol so that there's no dust. This is going to allow the adhesive backing on the antenna to contact with the car. And it's super important that it makes as much contact as possible because this is the thing that will keep water out of your car. Now go ahead and snake the wires through, taking care not to damage any of the wires on any of the sharp edges here. And go ahead and go inside the car and give it a good pull. And so once you do that, you should be able to connect the antenna to the roof. Now, one of the unfortunate side effects of using the shark fin antenna is that because of the curvature of the roof at this point, there's basically like a centimeter gap in the front or back of this. And so that's not going to be good because it's going to be allowing dust and rain inside. So the solution is silicone sealant. This is the stuff that's used in your house to seal up windowsills or bathtubs, and it's super cheap if you buy it at Home Depot. Pick up a bottle like this and go ahead and add the sealant all around the edges. Now you can find some tutorials on YouTube on how to do this. Now I'm by no means an expert at doing this. In fact, this is my first time ever using this, but I'm basically trying to fill up all the gaps here and even, leave some excess outside. Afterwards, you can use a little bit of dish soap, and if you put it on your finger, you can run it along the edge to really get rid of that excess silicone and make it look really nice and professional. Afterwards, you should put your vehicle somewhere semi-warm so that the silicone can cure. And now just a quick note about electrical contact. So this antenna technically doesn't need a ground plane, however it greatly benefits from one. So you want to make sure that when you screw in the antenna all the way, it actually contacts and digs into the paint on the inside of the roof so that there's an electrical connection. Alright, so this is what it looks like today. This is after over a month of driving around in the rain with dust, and it's still solid. And now if you don't actually want to replace your AM/FM radio, you can also just find an alternative mounting location too. And now going inside the van, let's take a look at the final product. So we have the Cradlepoint router up there in the headliner shelf, and my power button's down here. So when I turn it off, now when I go back up, it's off, which is great. That means we can save power. And when I turn it back on, we'll find that it's turned on and now it's connecting to the cell towers. Alright, so I hope that was helpful at showing you what you need to do if you want to do this yourself, or just letting you know what's involved in installing LTE internet. As far as what I've learned from the whole experience, just some interesting findings. There's definitely some really good things. I mean, first of all, having internet everywhere while I'm in the van, huge plus. Having internet in underground parking garages where my cell phone doesn't work, really awesome. Being on Verizon while my phone is on T-Mobile, which means I have even better kind of overall coverage, also really cool. And finally, being able to park my van in front of a restaurant that doesn't have Wi-Fi, and then go inside that restaurant and receive Wi-Fi from my van, parked like however many meters away, is just amazing. It's like being able to take my home internet connection with me wherever I go, which is just the coolest thing, I think. As far as the more challenging things, so first of all, I learned that this Cradlepoint router will actually operate on voltages as low as like 5 volts, right? So one time I had left the van for multiple weeks in an underground parking lot where it didn't get any solar, and so my router just drained the battery all the way down. And that's actually pretty bad for the battery. And so I've been dealing with like what seems to be some sort of battery damage or sulfation where it no longer charges back up to its full capacity. Another kind of challenging thing is the fact that if you start to really leave civilization behind and start entering like national parks where there's no cell reception at all, it can be challenging because the phone will connect to the router thinking that there's internet, and it won't try its own cellular connection, but the router won't have any LTE connection, And so even if your phone has like a 3G or 2G connection, it won't actually get to use it because it's still thinking that this Wi-Fi hotspot is able to serve it. And so that's kind of another frustrating thing. I haven't really figured out a solution beyond just turning off the LTE router when I drive too far out. But overall, I gotta say it's a pretty amazing experience to just have internet wherever I go. And you know, the install part was kind of involved, but I think it was all worth it. You know, it's so great to have that internet everywhere, especially a fast and reliable internet. So let me know if you guys have any comments, if any steps were unclear, or you want any more details on anything in this video. Just leave it in a comment and I will get back to you. So thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.